The Biden administration is reportedly considering forcing some migrant families who enter the United States without authorization to remain near the border in Texas while awaiting asylum screening. That's according to the LA Times. New York City Mayor Eric Adams recently weighed in on the influx of migrants into the United States and New York City.
Support. And let me tell you something, New Yorkers. Never in my life have I had a problem that I did not see an ending to. I don't see an ending to this. I don't see an ending to this. This issue will destroy New York City. Destroy New York City. We're getting 10,000 migrants a month.
New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy, a great man on the bench of the Democratic Party, likely to run for president someday, said that the state does not have the capacity to handle influx of migrants from New York City as the Biden administration considers the Atlantic City International Airport for migrant housing. He said yesterday, "I don't see any scenario where we're going to be able to take a program in Atlantic City or frankly elsewhere in the state." Also on the border issue, a federal judge in Austin has ordered Texas to remove river barriers that the state assembled along a portion of the U.S.-Mexico border to repel migrants, giving the Biden administration a win in its lawsuit against the barriers approved by Texas Governor Greg Abbott. Joining us now to discuss is Hill staff writer Rafael Bernal. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So let's go ahead and start with this question of potentially placing these asylum seekers back in Texas and other border states. There's been a lot of consternation from big city mayors like Eric Adams about the fact that migrants have been bused around the country, sort of shifting that burden away from the border states. So how are governors like Greg Abbott reacting to this news now that they're going to have to be responsible again for the vast majority of these illegal immigrants?
Well, it's still unconfirmed that this will happen, but it is very believable. This was written by Hamed Al-Aziz, who's a living legend among immigration reporters, so very believable. It's exactly the opposite of what Greg Abbott wants. Greg Abbott wants to be able to move migrants, sort of to weaponize migrants against big cities. But it might actually end up helping him politically because he'll get to complain more about this issue that he's been using. Whatever his logistical positions are on immigration, he's been very effectively using it politically to raise his national image.
Rafael, Mayor Adams, his rhetoric was unusually, highly sort of inflammatory and alarming about the city's capacity and capability to take on caring for these migrants. There are about, I believe 6 members of Congress in New York City that represent New York City and some part of it. Is he working with those members of Congress who represent New York City on the Hill to kind of figure out a congressional or federal solution? If not him, can they push the administration to do something to help with the effort going on in New York City?
So Democrats and immigration advocates are absolutely biting their lips to not criticize Eric Adams. They don't want this to become a friendly fire. They don't want to divide the Democratic Party. But the fact is, if any Republican had said half of what Eric Adams said, you'd see press releases all over calling it dog whistles, saying, this man is inciting racial violence. Now, they are worried. The advocates and some Democrats are worried that this sort of rhetoric can translate into violent acts, as we've seen. We have seen too many, obviously, ethnically and racially motivated shootings. So they really don't know what to do with Eric Adams. They're giving him the benefit of the doubt when he says it or that will destroy New York City. He means the lack of funding and not the migrants themselves. If that is the case, his phrasing has been absolutely terrible. If that's the message that he wants to convey, there is a sense of massive frustration. They do have a budget issue, but I just talked to Congressman Adriano Espaillat from New York, and one of the points he made to me is around 1907, Ellis Island was processing more than 1 million people into New York every year. When New York now complains about 10,000 or 100,000, being that we are a much more advanced society, presumably, than we were in 1907. Mm-hmm. Our capacity to absorb people should be a lot bigger. The big frustration, something that everybody shares, Eric Adams, Governor Hochul, is the delay and the difficulty in getting these people work permits, because there's a job market that can absorb a lot of people right now. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, whether it's red tape, whether it's they're not eligible, whether there's rules for them to wait, but there's a lot of people who could be working who are instead sitting in shelters.
Yeah, in my own family, my Italian ancestors or relatives came through Ellis Island around 1908, actually. What is the White House response to Mayor Adams' rhetoric? I mean, Adams is considered politically a sort of a rising star, future star of the Democratic Party, even talked about in some circles as a future presidential candidate, perhaps a keynote at the Democratic convention, something like that. Is there any response, either on background or on the record, about what he's saying?
Well, he's burned his bridges with this White House. Let's remember, he was going to be a Biden surrogate in this campaign. And when he started this months ago, started this sort of rhetoric, he was sort of unceremoniously dropped as a surrogate. But there wasn't a statement saying he said this, so we dropped him. The White House has been very quiet. I think the strongest message they gave was in receiving Governor Hochul, I believe it was last week, and telling her, we will work on you for these work permits. We want to work with you. Sort of giving Hochul, like, you make it cooperative. So we will work with you. Adams makes it combative. So there is that bigger separation. And if Adams indeed has presidential aspirations, like, this video is going to come back to haunt him, because it is the kind of content that a lot of immigrant communities, it's not just Hispanic immigrant communities, he even mentioned West African communities, that this, in a Democratic primary, I can absolutely see how this video would be spliced into attack ads.
So is the Democratic response to Mayor Eric Adams essentially, we don't like his rhetoric, he's not being helpful to the party, or is there any sense or self-awareness on their behalf that maybe sending 10,000 migrants to New York City a month actually isn't sustainable? And has the Biden administration expressed any willingness to not just accommodate migrants when they come, but actually stem the flow of them coming across the border in the first place?
Well, they would love to stem the flow, but no, like, it's been decades and nobody's sort of figured out that equation. Migrant flows happen very much despite U.S. policy, and I mean, as for Mayor Adams, I mean, he's putting himself in a position where he's saying that New York City can't do something. That is not very popular with a lot of New Yorkers. But he is, which ends up being divisive, because, of course, that rhetoric of fear of, like, this is going to, as he said, destroy us, that will resonate with some. Talking to Espaillat earlier, his view, and a lot of migrants are going to his neighborhood up in Washington Heights, where they speak Spanish, so a lot of Spanish speakers sort of gravitate in that direction. His view is that with the right funding and with the right programs, that this group can be absorbed, probably more easily than the millions of people were absorbed from the 1890s to the 1920s.
One last thing I just wanted to say is, if these are asylum seekers, is that my understanding that most of these are families who have sought asylum and are waiting for adjudication, Rafael?
That is incredibly complicated, and it is part of the question. The solution is not going to be one big thing. There are asylum seekers, there are parolees, there are people in the program for Haiti, Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. There are all sorts of different statuses. Some are stronger, some are weaker, some have a really weak asylum claim, frankly, and will most likely end up being deportable, if not actually deported. But each of these groups has to go through a different path of red tape to get their work permits. And for some of them, it's even easy. Like, they already are eligible for work permits, but they don't know it because the people around them aren't eligible for work permits. So it is incredibly complicated, and that's part of what a lot of advocates want the administration to fix, is just work on this that is purely executive. You don't need Congress. Make it easier. Whatever you need to do, just don't have people sitting around in shelters if they don't need to be.
Right. And of course, we have the other complicating factor that there's a huge backup in the immigration court system as well. Rafael, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back with more Rising after this.
Pleasure.